The courtroom erupted before the trial had even started. My sister-in-law stood, pointed at the Navy Cross on my chest, and said, "He's wearing that medal to manipulate the judge." The judge didn't hesitate. "Remove it immediately." Gasps echoed through the room. I slowly unclipped the Navy Cross my country had awarded me, laid it on the defense table, and looked directly at the judge. "Yes, Your Honor." Nobody understood why I wasn't arguing, because hidden inside the court's own evidence file was one document that wouldn't just destroy my sister-in-law's lawsuit. It would end the judge's career before the verdict was ever read. The judge hadn't even looked at the case file. The first thing he looked at was my Navy Cross. His eyes stopped on the medal resting neatly above the left pocket of my navy blue blazer. Then he leaned back in his chair. "You'll remove that before we begin." The courtroom fell silent. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "My medal, Your Honor?" "Yes." His voice was flat. "This is a courtroom, not a ceremony. We won't have displays designed to influence sympathy." Across the aisle, my sister-in-law smiled without trying to hide it. Her attorney lowered his head, pretending to organize papers, but I caught the grin spreading across his face. A few people sitting behind them exchanged amused looks. I slowly reached toward my jacket, not because I agreed with him, not because I was embarrassed to wear the medal, because I'd spent 26 years in the United States Navy learning something far more valuable than winning arguments. Sometimes, patience is stronger than pride. I carefully unclipped the Navy Cross, placed it inside a small leather case, and laid it on my attorney's table. "I'll comply, Your Honor." The judge gave a short nod. "Good. Now perhaps we can focus on facts instead of decorations." If only he knew. The facts were exactly what would change everything. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 58 years old. I retired from the Navy 6 years earlier after a career that took me across oceans most people only saw on maps. I never talked much about my service. The Navy Cross wasn't something I wore to impress strangers. Most days it stayed locked inside a safe at home. The only reason I wore it that morning was because the hearing had been scheduled on Veterans Recognition Day. After the hearing, I had planned to attend a ceremony at the local memorial with several families of fallen service members. Instead, I found myself sitting in a courtroom while my own sister-in-law tried to convince a judge that I had stolen my father's legacy. Her name was Melissa Carter. 6 years earlier, she had married my younger brother, Thomas. Thomas had been the kind of man everyone trusted immediately. He laughed loudly, worked hard, never forgot birthdays. When cancer took him at 49, our family lost its center. Melissa wasn't left struggling. My brother had made sure she received substantial life insurance, retirement accounts, and their family home. No one questioned that. No one wanted anything from her, least of all me. For nearly 3 years after Thomas passed away, we barely spoke. Then my father died. Everything changed. Dad had owned a beautiful lakeside property that had belonged to our family for almost 70 years. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't worth tens of millions. But it carried memories money couldn't replace. Fishing with Grandpa. Summer cookouts. Christmas mornings by the stone fireplace. My father left the property to me, not because I demanded it, not because I persuaded him, because years earlier, after Thomas moved across the country for work, Dad had asked who would actually care for the place. I promised I would, and I kept that promise. Every broken fence, every leaking roof, every tax payment, every winter storm cleanup. For nearly 15 years, Melissa hadn't visited the cabin more than twice. Yet the week after the funeral, she hired one of the most expensive law firms in the state. According to her lawsuit, my father had supposedly changed his will while suffering from cognitive decline. She claimed I manipulated him, pressured him, isolated him. She wanted the court to void the will completely. When the lawsuit arrived, I wasn't angry. I was confused. Because every medical evaluation from Dad's final years showed he remained mentally sharp. Every legal document had been properly witnessed. Every decision had been carefully documented. None of that mattered to Melissa. She wasn't interested in the truth. She was betting that emotion would defeat evidence. As opening statements began, Her attorney stood confidently. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning toward the judge, "this case is about influence." Mr. Mercer built a reputation as a decorated military hero. For years, that reputation allowed him to dominate family decisions. Today, we intend to show that the final decision regarding the estate was simply another example. I didn't react. My attorney didn't either. He quietly slid a thick sealed folder across the table toward me. He leaned closer and whispered just 4 words. "Not yet. Stay patient." I nodded once. Across the room, Melissa folded her arms, completely certain she'd already won. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked toward me, and said the words that made every instinct I developed during decades of service tell me this hearing was about to become far bigger than a dispute over a family cabin. I had learned something during my years in uniform. The loudest person in the room rarely controlled the outcome. The quietest one often did. Melissa's attorney paced confidently before the judge, as though the verdict had already been written. He spoke with polished certainty. "Mr. Mercer wants this court to believe he acted out of love." He turned toward me. "But love doesn't explain why every valuable asset ended up under his control." Melissa lowered her eyes at exactly the right moment. Anyone watching from the gallery would have thought she was fighting back tears. I knew better. I'd seen that performance before. The first time had been 2 weeks after my father's funeral. She had invited me over, saying she wanted to talk privately. Instead, she slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table. "If you sign these," she said, "we can avoid lawyers." The documents transferred ownership of the lake property into a family trust she controlled. When I refused, she smiled. Not sadly, not angrily, confidently. "You'll regret making this difficult." At the time, I assumed it was grief talking. Now I understood it had been the opening move. Back in the courtroom, her attorney displayed enlarged photographs of the cabin. "This property has appreciated dramatically over the past decade." He clicked to another image. Mr. Mercer stood to gain hundreds of thousands of dollars. The implication hung in the air. Money, greed, manipulation. The judge nodded, as though the argument made perfect sense. Then my attorney stood. He didn't rush. He didn't object dramatically. He simply walked to our table, picked up the thick sealed folder, and carried it toward the clerk. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "the defense would like to submit certified exhibits 1 through 12. The clerk accepted the folder. The judge frowned. "I wasn't aware additional documents were being introduced." "They were disclosed according to schedule," my attorney replied. The judge glanced toward Melissa's lawyer. For the first time that morning, his confidence cracked. Only for a second. "But I saw it." He quickly recovered. "We've already established the motive," he argued. "These documents don't change the fact that the defendant benefited from the will." My attorney smiled politely. "They change something much more important, the truth." The judge reluctantly opened the folder. The courtroom grew quiet. Inside were certified copies of every property tax payment made over the previous 15 years. Every payment carried my name. Every receipt had been recorded by the county. Then came maintenance invoices, roof repairs, dock restoration, electrical upgrades, storm damage, insurance renewals. Thousands upon thousands of dollars invested long before my father passed away. Melissa had contributed nothing. My attorney continued. "Next, we'd like to introduce Mr. Robert Jennings." An elderly man walked slowly toward the witness stand. I smiled. Dad's attorney. He had drafted every version of my father's estate plan for nearly 20 years. After taking the oath, he answered calmly. "Did your client ever appear confused while discussing his estate?" "No." "Did anyone pressure him during those meetings?" "No." "Who requested the final revision?" "My client did." "Without anyone else's involvement?" "Correct." Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Her attorney immediately stood. "Objection. Memory can fade." Mr. Jennings looked directly at him. "I'm 92 years old." He smiled gently. "I may forget where I leave my reading glasses. I don't forget legal meetings that lasted 6 hours." Soft laughter spread through the gallery. Even a court reporter smiled. The judge quickly restored order. But something had changed. The room no longer belonged to Melissa. Then came another witness, Dr. Emily Carson, Dad's physician. She reviewed his medical records. Did Mr. Mercer Sr. suffer from dementia?
No.
Was he capable of making financial and legal decisions? Absolutely. She held up neurological evaluations completed just 8 months before Dad passed away. Every score fell within the normal range. Melissa's attorney flipped through his notes faster now. His prepared narrative was slipping away. Then my attorney asked the question I'd been waiting months to hear. Doctor, did your patient ever discuss concerns about family pressure? Yes. The courtroom leaned forward. He told me he worried someone would challenge his wishes after his death. Melissa's eyes widened. He specifically said he wanted everything documented because he expected legal trouble. Silence. Complete silence. My attorney thanked the witness and returned to our table. But he didn't sit down. Instead, he reached into the folder one last time. This final exhibit wasn't prepared by our office. It comes directly from the Judicial Ethics Commission. The judge's expression changed instantly. What is that supposed to mean? My attorney remained respectful. It concerns a disclosure issue. Melissa's attorney shot to his feet. Objection. On what grounds? My attorney asked. He hesitated. The judge interrupted before an answer came. I'll review the document privately. My attorney nodded. Certainly. But because it directly concerns potential judicial disclosure obligations, we'd respectfully ask that it become part of the official record. The judge's fingers tightened around the folder. His face lost color. Just moments earlier, he'd ordered me to remove my Navy Cross as though appearances mattered more than facts. Now, he was staring at a document that appeared to raise questions about his own impartiality. Across the aisle, Melissa whispered urgently to her attorney. He whispered back. Neither of them looked nearly as confident as they had 20 minutes earlier. For the first time since the lawsuit began, they weren't looking at me. They were looking at the judge. The judge held the document for several long seconds. No one spoke. Even the courtroom air felt different. Finally, he cleared his throat. We'll take a brief recess. His voice no longer carried the confidence it had earlier that morning. He stood and disappeared through the door behind the bench. The moment it closed, whispers spread through the gallery. Melissa leaned toward her attorney. What was in that folder? She asked. I couldn't hear his answer. But judging by his expression, he didn't know either. My attorney remained seated. He calmly gathered his notes, as though nothing unusual had happened. I looked at him. So? He smiled. Now we let the process work. 20 minutes later, everyone returned. The judge looked noticeably different. His shoulders were tense. His usual confidence had been replaced by carefully chosen words. He adjusted his glasses. Before proceeding, I need to address a procedural matter. The courtroom became silent again. It has come to my attention that a prior professional association connected to today's proceedings should have been disclosed at the outset. Melissa's attorney slowly closed his notebook. He understood exactly where this was heading. The judge continued. In the interest of maintaining public confidence in the fairness of these proceedings, I am referring this matter for administrative review and recusing myself from further participation. A collective gasp moved through the courtroom. Melissa stared at him. What? Her attorney immediately placed a hand on her arm. Don't. She ignored him. You can't just walk away now. The judge didn't respond. He simply stood, gathered his files, and left the bench. For the second time that day, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. 3 weeks later, we returned before a different judge. This time there were no comments about medals. No assumptions. No unnecessary speeches. Only evidence. Every document was reviewed carefully. Certified property records, tax receipts, medical evaluations, witness testimony. My father's handwritten letter explaining why he wanted me to inherit the cabin. The letter wasn't emotional. It was practical. Daniel has cared for this place for years. He knows every inch of it. He'll protect it the way our family always has. Please honor this decision. That single page carried more weight than months of accusations. Melissa's attorney tried one final argument. He claimed the letter reflected favoritism. The new judge simply asked one question. Do you have any evidence that the decedent lacked legal capacity?
No.
Do you have evidence the documents were forged?
No.
Do you have evidence the defendant exerted unlawful influence? A long pause followed. No, Your Honor. The answer echoed through the room. The judge closed the file. This court finds no legal basis to invalidate the estate plan. The will remains fully enforceable. The complaint is dismissed. Melissa lowered her head. For months, she had believed confidence alone could replace proof. It couldn't. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited near the steps. Microphones pointed toward me. Someone shouted, "Captain Mercer, how do you feel after winning?" I stopped walking. I didn't come here to win. I came here to protect my father's wishes. Another reporter asked whether I wanted to comment on the judge, who had stepped aside. I shook my head. The review process speaks for itself. I have nothing to add. Weeks later, the Judicial Oversight Commission announced its findings. The undisclosed conflict had violated judicial ethics requirements. Appropriate disciplinary action followed, and the judge's legal career never fully recovered. I didn't celebrate. I never wanted anyone's life destroyed. Accountability isn't revenge. It's responsibility. Melissa eventually sent a short letter. It wasn't an apology. Not completely. But it admitted she'd allowed anger and financial pressure to cloud her judgment after losing Thomas. For the first time in years, she accepted that my father had made his own decisions. I wrote back with only one sentence. I hope you find peace. That autumn, I drove to the lake cabin alone. The dock still creaked beneath my boots. The old maple tree still leaned toward the water exactly as it had when I was 10 years old. I unlocked the front door. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and old memories. Before unpacking, I opened the leather case that had remained in my truck since the first hearing. The Navy Cross rested exactly where I had placed it. I pinned it back onto my jacket, not because anyone was watching, not because I needed recognition, because that medal had never represented victory. It represented service, sacrifice, duty, and the quiet promise to stand firm when doing the right thing became uncomfortable. As the sun disappeared beyond the lake, I finally understood something my father had tried to teach me years earlier. Your reputation is built over a lifetime. People may question it. They may challenge it. They may even try to take it away. But character doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the person who refuses to abandon the truth, even when standing alone. And in the end, the truth never needed me to defend it with anger. It only needed me to stand still long enough for everyone else to finally see it.